Opponents of the faith-based approach to life argue that the concept of God is irrational and superstitious, and that we can understand all we need to know about the world and the people in it through science. Until recently I was such a person, and then I witnessed the way in which science was used as a cudgel of violent authoritarianism to bully and bamboozle humanity with fabricated data and spurious claims of and I became a believer. Let me say at the outset that I have yet to understand exactly who or what God is, and indeed, if there even is such an entity. But I've come to regard the question of the actual existence of God as largely irrelevant. So how then can I be a believer? My belief is based not necessarily on the existence of an omnipotent being, but on the certainty that there are eternal truths which cannot be diluted, refuted, or bent according to the will of any human. Truths such as these: no person should be forced to put anything into their body against their will. No young, healthy person should have their livelihood destroyed in the name of protecting the elderly and infirm. No person should be prevented from sitting with a dying loved one. No government has the right to mortgage the future of its constituents in order to bankroll a pharmaceutical company to produce a for an illness that is to the vast majority of people. Such truths and hundreds more are self-evident and above the tinkering of politicians, technocrats and billionaires. Such truths are immutable and immune to the machinations of man. As such, God is truth. The journey toward truth can track many courses, some of which intersect and run in parallel, but all leading to the same terminus: reality. The denial of reality is central to suffering and misery. It is the basis for evil. I've not only witnessed this in the gross abuses of human rights throughout the pandemic, but experienced it also in a deeply personal manner via the affliction of drug and alcohol addiction. Central to any addiction is a denial of reality. You've heard it said, I'm sure, that the first part of overcoming or managing an addiction is admitting there is a problem. I know from experience that this is true. And let's be clear, admitting there is a problem is not the grudging acknowledgement that one drinks too much, the half-hearted attempts at cutting down, the duplicitous interactions with counsellors or support groups. Admission is coming face to face with the reality of the problem in a stark and often terrifying moment of clarity, popularly known as rock bottom. Reality. For me, this involved the destruction of my marriage, the death of 2 close friends, unrelated to any action of mine, but both as a result of their own addictions, a feeble flirtation with suicide, and ultimately my arrest and embroilment in the justice system at a cost of many thousands of dollars, not to mention my long bloated pride. But I'm not here to recount the sordid tales of my road to recovery. What I wish to illustrate through the example of addiction is that evil does not come into play by way of the vice itself. The human's own frailty creates the evil. There's nothing wrong with alcohol or drugs or gambling or sugar or any pleasurable pursuit in moderation. It only becomes evil when one indulges compulsively and repeatedly. And this is only possible when one is engaged in the common self-deception that they do not have a problem which is causing harm to themselves and others. The denial of reality. Serendipitously for me, at the same time I began seriously confronting my addiction problem, the world was plunged into the great of the COVID narrative. A so preposterous that it accelerated a parallel journey of awakening which I'd been on for a few years: politics. As the enormity of the COVID dawned on me, the two paths converged, and here is where I found God. Suddenly I saw the self-deceit that had allowed me to drink and use drugs problematically for over a decade mirrored in the mass abdication of rationality that allowed our societies to embrace the madness of the lockdowns, mask-wearing and vaccine mandates. Suddenly it became clear to me that it is the machinations of humans which are irrational and superstitious, and that to follow God is in fact the rational course. To follow truth is the antidote to superstition and hysteria. That's why I named my Substack blog Anxiety, Addiction and Ascension, because I realised that the journey towards personal well-being and growth tracks exactly the same path as the political awakening, and that to ascend into the realm of truth, one need only recognise the duplicitous nature of man. It is man's duplicitous nature that enables the addict, man's ability to deceive himself. And it is this same nature that enables the monstrous acts of evil we have seen perpetrated across the globe since 2020, but which are, of course, as old as humankind itself. Man's ability to deceive his fellow men, and in turn, their willingness to be deceived. Sad as it may be, we cannot trust the words of humans. Humans are frail, selfish, and craven. That is why we have God. We either invented him in response to our own frailty as an eternal and inviolable avenue to the truth, or indeed he does exist, and all truth flows from him. Either way, the reality remains that humans have always and will always seek to manipulate and dominate one another. For this reason, human power structures cannot be trusted. Human endeavour must always be questioned, regardless of how it's presented to the subject. And human science, while essential, must never be deified. Science is not God. God is truth, and there is a world of difference between science and truth. As such, we must be instantly suspicious of any person or organisation that chants the mantra, "Trust the science." This insidious maxim lays bare the intention of its proponents, that we should not trust what we see, what we feel, and what we know to be morally right. We should instead trust the science. It is important here to understand what is meant by the science. It does not refer to the scientific method, which is the process of objectively establishing facts through testing and experimentation, but rather it is an appeal to authority. Trust the science means abandon critical thought and believe what that person over there in the white coat is saying. For the purposes of the COVID paradigm, it means, of course, trust the pharmaceutical industry. But the science is a versatile tool. The science shows that carbon dioxide is destroying the planet. The science shows that veganism is the ideal human diet. The science shows that gender transitioning children at an early age reduces the risk of suicide. The science can show anything if you're selective with the data. As the saying goes, lies, lies, and damn statistics. The science is man's attempt to make himself into God. The science is the obfuscation of, and sometimes the outright denial of reality. Those who wish to destroy God are not at war with superstition and irrationality. It is quite the opposite. Those who wish to destroy God and would have us trust the science desire only the destruction of truth. That's all God is, as far as I've been able to determine so far. God is reality. God is what we know to be true, and thus what we know to be right. If you strike or cruelly chastise someone and they recoil in fear and pain, you see the suffering you have caused. The suffering is real. It is true. What then is that feeling of guilt? From whence derives the voice in your head which says you've done something wrong? To me, that's God. Morality, as described in the teachings of Christ, is as close as I've been able to get to a conception of eternal, universal truth. This accounts for the great impact of Christianity upon the world, for all the many failings of its human institutions. Humanity has been moving away from God for many decades now, and in his place we have erected the deity of the science, the deity of man. To this deity there is no truth, only power. The power to change one's gender at will. The power to make all people equal. The power to remake the world as one sees fit. In short, Marxism. What is the central truth of life? We all die. And the inevitability of death is the starkest manifestation of a broader truth. Life is not fair. Marxism, at its core, seeks to mitigate this facet of reality. As such, Marxism and all its offshoots, from communism to Agenda 2030, fundamentally seek to deny reality. This scourge in its current form has plagued humanity for nearly 200 years now, and despite what the official history of the 20th century tells us, it never went away. It has in fact metastasized and gone global, forming the backbone of our new corporate international order via ESG and DEI. We can tie ourselves in knots discussing Marxism, neo-Marxism, and its contemporary permutation, what James Lindsay calls identity Marxism. But it all becomes very simple when we understand what lies at its heart: the denial of reality and the destruction of truth. There's a simplicity and beauty about truth which anyone who seeks to abuse people hates by dint of its very real power, the power to discern evil. This power, which enabled me to discern that I was destroying my life with alcohol, also made it clear to me early in the COVID saga that we were being lied to and abused. It wasn't difficult. I simply observed that people were not dropping like flies and juxtaposed this fact with the establishment messaging. And there lay the truth. And that's the most powerful thing about the truth: its simplicity. The Marxists who seek to remake the world as they see fit know this, and they fear it, which is why the messaging is so persistent, so incongruent, and so frenetic. It is why leftism has always been so acerbically hostile toward religion. When we orientate ourselves solely toward the truth, everything else falls away. It becomes background noise, static. Indeed, this is articulated in Scripture. Be still and know that I am God. This is the thing they fear most, that the truth lives in all of us. It's just there. It just is. And it is indeed what will set us free. Whether we're endowed with it at birth or learn it along the way is another question for another day. What matters is we all have it, each one of us, within us, and we could choose whether or not to embrace it. Now, I don't know exactly what that is, but I'm happy enough to call it God. Thanks for listening. Please subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any future videos. Please also subscribe to my Substack at jjdawson.substack.com. And if you'd like to keep in touch, please do follow me on Twitter at RealJJDawson. You can also follow me on Getter, Gab, and Minds. And of course, if you enjoyed this, please do give it a like and share it about, because it really helps me out.